Welcome to another episode of Behind the Veil, where we delve deep into realms of high strangeness and exploring phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. I'm your host, Mike Hughes, and today we have a guest, retired Wright-Patterson Air Force Base engineer Ray Szymanski, who will be discussing his book 50 Shades of Grays, as in the aliens. His book is based on evidence of extraterrestrial visitation to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and beyond. In July 1947, people reported seeing a UFO crash near Roswell, New Mexico. The U.S. military quickly confiscated all debris and materials from that incident, which are believed to be stored in the mysterious Hangar 18 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Ray's book delves into the history and rumors surrounding Hangar 18 and makes the case that extraterrestrials have visited the base. With over 30 years working at Wright-Patterson, Ray brings an insider's perspective to the lore of alien technology being researched and stored on the base. We'll discuss what he's discovered while working there and why he believes the truth is still being covered up. This is a story of government secrecy, alien visitors, and one man's quest to unveil the truth. Join us for fascinating conversation about UFOs and Wright-Patterson on this episode of Behind the Veil. With a very big welcome, Ray, thanks so much for joining us.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
You got it. And let's just jump right into it. Obviously, you know, you have a long career and history with this. How did this fascinating tale start for you?
In January of 1973, I was a cooperative education student at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I was assigned a mentor who I'll call Al.
Mm-hmm.
And Al said, "Hey, you know, as a nice welcome, I'm going to take you through the hangar, which was connected to our two-story office building, and then into another two-story office building, which was connected on the other end." This hangar was about 250 feet across, but it had been mothballed. There were no airplanes in it, just long, dirty, purplish blue hangars trying to block out thousands of these little windows. So we stepped out of our office building down this little tiny ramp into this deserted hangar. And he turns to me and says, "Have you heard about our aliens?"
Mm.
Well, I'm a co-op student from the University of Detroit, and I don't know aliens from Jack. So I just said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "Well, in 1947, there was a crash out west, and it was recovered and brought here to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base along with its occupants." And I was like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, you know, from space." So we're having this conversation as we're walking through this 250-foot hangar. And I asked him, "Well, you know, what do you know about it? What can you tell me?" "Well, there was this crash and they recovered it and they keep these things in the tunnels." I'm like, "We have tunnels?"
Right.
"Yeah, of course we have tunnels." And the conversation went further. And I eventually said, "Well, can we see these aliens in the tunnels?" And he goes, "No."
Shocking.
"Yeah, well, why not?"
You're all right.
"Well, it's a secret." And I said, "Well, Al, if it's a secret, how do you know about it?" And he said, "Well, everybody knows about it." Well, in the ensuing, days, weeks, and months, I got to talk to the people that I would meet. I'm a co-op student, so I'm the lowest of the lowest on the totem pole. And I'd ask him, I said, "Well, Al told me this thing about UFOs and aliens and crashes." I come to find out at that point that Project Blue Book had been there for decades, hosted at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base within the Foreign Technology Division. And, it was widely publicized, one of the most probably known projects on the entire base.
Absolutely.
So it was that connection that everybody knew. And I think Al had other information and was jumping off or maybe giving me a hazing. But I will point out, and that whole story is covered in detail in my book, Al went on to become the civilian equivalent of a flag level officer. In other words, a general or an admiral. So this wasn't just some guy, who was a standard everyday Joe like me.
Right.
When I left, I was a GS-14, a high level 14, but he was an SES, Senior Executive Service. And in fact, many decades after this conversation, when I had enough information that I think I want to publish this first book. I have something I can contribute. I found out where Al lived and I sent him a letter. And in that letter, I put verbatim from my memory the conversation we had and say, I'm going to write this book, and if you have any changes to this or any objection to me including it, now's your chance. So I got this great letter back with my original letter and my litany of what went on this discussion, and he wrote, I need to remind you that I'm a member of the senior executive service, so you're not allowed to use my name. And I've made the changes below as requested. Right. And the only thing he did for this like 3.5-page description of that event was he wrote, I can neither confirm nor deny.
Don't you love that?
Aliens being at Wright-Patterson.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah. And so I thought that was the coolest thing. So all of that is actually in the book. And that's how it all started, through that discussion my very first week at Wright-Pat.
Well, let's talk about exactly what type of alien technology that is allegedly there at Wright-Pat. Let's kind of get into the history of, was it the Roswell crash? That's what a lot of people believe, amongst other craft is there as well. But if you don't mind, kind of dive into maybe some of the historical information on what actually may be there and where it came from.
That's a good question. In 1947, as everybody knows who followed the Roswell incident, there was a crash in July. The Army Air Corps, as it was back then, wasn't Air Force yet as an independent service until September that year. They went out and scoured the grounds, took everything that Mac Brazel had brought in. He showed them where some stuff was shoved into a shed. So they grabbed it, picked it up, they took it back, and their intelligence officers, including Jesse Marcel Sr., looked at it, and they declared as a group that it was parts of a crash flying saucer. So they allowed their public affairs officer, Lieutenant Walter Haut, to go ahead and broadcast that, and he did. And then the entire world descended on Roswell Army Air Base because this was unprecedented. It literally shut them down, a denial of service. The phones rang off the hook. Newsmen were coming in. Everyone that could get in touch with them did get in touch with them. So they thought, okay, this isn't good. And General LeMay, who was in charge, chief of staff of the Air Force back then, told them, you need to shut this down.
Yeah.
So they put out the word, well, it was a weather balloon. And let me just sidebar for a minute. When I say the word sidebar, it's going to be hopefully an illuminating or hilarious story. You're telling me that the intelligence officers of the group, the only nuclear-armed bombing group in the world, could not tell the difference between a crashed weather balloon and a flying saucer?
Yeah.
I can only tell you, it worries me to think that these were the people in charge of our defense. And I certainly hope that their identification skills have improved somewhat since 1947.
Yeah, and especially if you're trying to, let's just pretend for a second it was a weather balloon, a top secret weather balloon that you're trying to hide. Saying it's a crashed saucer would be the worst thing you could possibly ever do to do any type of psyop of trying to keep that a secret. I mean, that is the worst possible idea of anything you could ever say, knowing you're going to get the entire world's attention focused on that area and your air base.
They didn't think it through. And so they swore everybody to secrecy. They threatened the civilians who were in on the story and just had to be part of it as part of, providing first responder services and that sort of thing. The phone call to the mortuary regarding caskets. So in 1978, you're looking at 30 years later, Stanton Friedman is in Louisiana giving a talk about flying saucers. And somebody catches him after the show and says, hey, I know this guy who was at Roswell during this time period, and he's got a story to tell. And the guy he was talking about was Jesse Marcel Sr., who was a intelligence officer. So Friedman got with Marcel and on film got him to admit, what we found in the desert, what I handled, what I brought out of the desert, because Marcel was the guy who was sent out there by his colonel, Colonel Blanchard, who was head of Roswell Army Airfield at the time. Go out there, take this other guy, take these carry-all jeeps, bring back what you can. They evaluated it. They were all sworn to secrecy. Well, in the mid 70s, someone was leaking stories about flying saucer and crash recovery. And when Marcel saw or heard about that at the newspaper's stand, he thought, well, secret's out. Apparently, it's been 30 years. I guess, well, people are telling the truth. So Friedman found him, and Stanton Friedman, got Jesse Marcel Sr. to admit on tape that it wasn't from the planet Earth. They couldn't cut it, burn it, stretch it, hammer it. They'd crush it in their hands and it would come back to its original shape. Properties and physics not of this earth. And that's when the story came out. So what had happened is during that week after the recovery, they decided to send Marcel for a photo op to the 8th Army Air Corps in Fort Worth. And it was a setup because Marcel had accompanied that material to Army Air Corps Fort Worth. They put him in a room and they said, yeah, that's what I found. Then they took that away, left him in a room, brought in the crashed weather balloon, and then they brought the press in who snapped those photos. And Marcel, you can read his eyes. He's looking up like, this is BS. But he was told and warned, you will shut up.
Yeah.
But 1978 or so, Friedman finds him, and the jig is up. He tells the truth. He said, on top of that, and here's the answer to your question. He says, we took that material to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The other key witness to that was another person who saw the wreckage. He was the chief of staff, went on to become a general in later years. Mm-hmm. He signed an affidavit in years later after he retired and said, I was there the day Marcel brought it in. I saw it. I handled it. We did cursory tests there in our office. It was not of the planet Earth. I agree with Major Marcel. And so you had two key witnesses from the Air Force who handled that material and said it went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Yeah. So that's where the documentation comes from. Never did they say aliens went there, but we know darn well that the material did.
Yeah. And what are people, obviously, you have an entire book on the lore there at the base, but what have you, let's talk about some of the private conversations or even just the gossip itself of what's actually at Wright-Pat. I mean, talk about the details of how that's kind of some of the, I guess, whisper over there at the base.
Well, obviously it started in my first week that there was a connection between Wright-Pat and flying saucers, but nobody really knew for sure. They knew. Now this was 78. I showed up in 73, so it'd be another half a dozen years or so after I show up that Marcel's testimony becomes public knowledge. And at that point, Blue Book ended in 69. I show up in 73. So there's a 4-year kind of hiatus between the closing of Blue Book and my first appearance on base, and another half a dozen years until, almost 10 years till, Marcel spills the beans. So there was kind of an uptick in the conversation about, holy cow, where is this stuff? And everything pointed to the Foreign Technology Division because that was a unit on base that was supposed to collect foreign technology, whoever it was, the Russian, Chinese, Koreans, perhaps even our allies, to kind of get a look behind the curtain to see what technology they were possessing or developing. The same thing with these crash disks. The problem is that where this stuff was supposed to go is an extremely closed society. Right now, there's no even windows in this building.
Yeah.
And the people, I've known people for years who've worked there, they will say nothing. They're like the three monkeys. So there's really hard knowing, but I think you'd have to extrapolate. Think about it. Air Force Research Labs and its predecessor components like the Material Directorate have been there for over 100 years.
Yeah.
Air Force Material, the Material Lab has been there since 1917. So by 1947, they'd been on base investigating aerospace materials for 30 years. And most certainly, the material was brought to that lab, a suitcase open, briefcase. Here you go. We can't tell you where we got this. Put it through every material test you can. Write a report on it. Call us when you're done. They come back. They pick it up. There's one copy of the report. everybody is sworn to secrecy, and nobody knows what they really found out in 1947. And so it goes to this day. The labs are there. We've
Yeah.
got 2,500 people employed at Wright-Pat in Air Force research laboratories.
And
But
some
who
major
really knows?
weapon defense contractors too, right?
Yeah, we have 25,000 people stationed at Wright-Patterson, and you have 2,500. I'm going to give or take. I've been retired 10 years now, so you got 2,500 lab guys and many contractors out there, both on site and off site,
Hmm.
all around the world, doing research of all sorts. So I would say, the world is your oyster. It could be anything.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, let's dive into the infamous Hangar 18 and how that's become a major focal point of all of this.
I think Hangar 18 is just a notional concept. I think, let's take the Roswell incident. Probably
Hmm.
what happened is whomever, the two pieces went to the 8th Army Air Corps in Fort Worth, and then pieces of it, based on testimony from the witnesses, including Major Marcel. He said, we sent stuff to Washington, D.C. because LeMay wanted to put his hands on it himself.
Hmm.
And so now it's in two places in the country, Texas and Washington, D.C. And from one of those places, materials were taken to Wright-Patterson. And again, the largest piece ever discussed was only 3 feet large.
Hmm.
Mostly it was 100,000 pieces, 2 inches by 2 inches. So they put a bunch of this stuff, maybe a little girder, and in a briefcase, lock it to them, just like those James Bond movies, and they take it to the Material Directorate. I'm just guessing.
Hmm.
Back then, it was called the Materials Lab, and they present it. So the material doesn't necessarily, and it wouldn't necessarily go to a place like FTD, because FTD is just the hunter gatherers.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the people who do the evaluation. They job it out. They bring it to the labs and say, what can you tell us about this? So the same thing with Hangar 18. The point I'm trying to make is, if the biggest piece of Roswell crash wreckage was 2 feet by 3 feet, you don't need a freaking hangar.
No.
It's just, it doesn't make sense. You just need somebody to cart it, and a hangar would be a terrible place. If you want to steal something at Wright-Patterson, go into a hangar. With a credit card and a beer cap opener.
Right.
They're the least secure places on the entire base. So I can't see anybody keeping that material there. I think it's just notional,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And what kind of work did you do there for the 30 years that you were there?
Actually, 38 years and 9 months. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that my pension doesn't depend on your statistics.
Good.
Because at my
30
career,
plus years. I forgot to add the plus.
almost 40. I like saying
Okay.
almost 40.
I like that. We can round it up to that.
Yeah, as an engineer, we get to round up or down. I'm rounding up.
Okay. Yeah. There's denominator. I can
Yeah.
understand that.
So in almost 40 years, in fact, it spanned 5 decades
Yeah.
from 1973 to 2011. Just made that last decade, just in time.
Oh,
So when you get on base, you're a cop student. You don't know anything. You don't know where the coffee shop is.
yeah.
So once they take you around and tell you about the aliens and all that stuff, initially I'm in an office, learning how they do engineering hour accounting, for example, and finding all about what it means to what a contract means, and going to classes about contracting, because that is, no matter what you do on the base, eventually you're going to be doing something with the contract. You're going to be running a contract. You're going to be the technical skill working on a contract. So there's a lot of that. And then the next couple of co-op assignments, I built electronics. Senior engineers had designed circuits, and it was my job. In one case, it was a circuit that was going to go up in a satellite. And they had people building twins and triplicates. It was some really high-tech stuff,
Yeah.
and there were some strict requirements, and I had some very strict. I had an engineer looking over my shoulder, but I had to lay out the printed circuit card. I had to make sure that I had the right materials there. I had to load it with the components that could meet very stringent specifications. Then we tested it. I spent a couple months developing it and moving it around, and I had to lay out the boards and fire those boards up in a vault, and indeed we did with a couple of senior scientists there, and it fired up. They tweaked a couple of the potentiometers there, but out of the box, I'm the junior guy. I'm not going
Yeah.
to jack with the circuit, right? So they fired it up and said, bingo, man, this rocks. Now, I
Yeah.
don't think they were going to send it up, but I think they was going to be part of the testing. So
Mhm.
as everyone put their boards together, probably had a back plane, and there was a system that they were developing, then they could test this on the ground and eventually go, okay, we're going to put all these on maybe one board, or consolidate them, because space and weight is critical on a satellite. And so that's some of the things you did. You burned your fingers on soldering guns, and did some circuit design and build some things, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And do you believe, I mean, is it possible with that many people being on a base of that caliber, do you think that they would really be able to keep something of that magnitude secret? I mean, obviously people talked about it, but do you think, I mean, obviously there's secrets that are being held on the base of all shapes and forms. But if something like that, do you think that they would truly be able to keep something like that really hush hush?
Sure, tens of thousands of people worked on the atomic bomb, and it was kept secret. So I think the alien thing would be much easier to do. One, because it's part of the lore, and any discussion kind of gets a snicker.
Yeah.
It's because most people haven't researched it. They don't know the truth behind the matter. So I think there'd be a lot of blow off. And in fact, if a guy actually worked on the project for real, let's say it was for real, and you met
Hmm.
a guy, and you're having beers, and you sit next to a guy at a bar, and um, he might even start the conversation and say, "Have you heard about the aliens at Wright-Patterson?" And you'd be like, "Well, sure, I have." He
Yeah.
goes, "Well, they're real."
Yeah.
Well, because of the obfuscation and the mind games by unnamed agencies, that people would take that with a grain of salt. Oh, you work at base, yeah, and then you'd have a good laugh, because it's that's just it. It's part of the lore.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could most definitely keep that a secret. In fact, I think um, you would not want to be that guy that let that secret out,
Sure.
for
It's
sure.
funny. It's funny because I met a guy who was in the weapon defense industry, and he was, I think their corporate building was, or his building in particular was at Wright Pat. And I was like, "Oh, you probably know about the UFOs, huh?" And he goes, yeah, and just kind of smiled and laughed. But I mean, obviously that's what that place is known for. Um, what let's kind of get into what really compelled you to write this book. I mean, what drove you to get this information out?
Most excellent question. I never expected to write one book, much less three books.
Hmm.
My second book is about alien abduction, and I did a 2-year case study of a family. The grandmother claims to be an abductee, and then, of course, my last book is about a Air Force American hero who actually intercepted the famous swamp gas UFO
Yeah.
in southeastern Michigan. So never had any intention. What I did is I set out on a quest, and I said, I had heard so much for so many years from so many people with this big snicker factor about the aliens. I went on a quest to find the truth myself.
Hmm.
So I went to libraries. I read every book. I read articles. I found old APRO magazines and things like that. And then in around 2008, I had a TDY to Hanscom Air Force Base, which is not too far from Exeter, New Hampshire. And I thought, this is a perfect opportunity. So what I did is I worked my shifts, did my due diligence, and then went off to dinner in Exeter, went to a restaurant, and started to snoop around. There's a famous book called Incident at Exeter. And I had studied that book for years. And of course, using now, you know, that was Exeter was 65. The book probably came out in 66, 67
Hmm.
by Raymond Fowler. Great, great, great legendary investigator. But he left enough breadcrumbs in there for me to follow. I could go to the hotel where he stayed, and
Hmm.
where the investigator stayed, to do the book. Um, I'm sorry, Fowler didn't write that. Fowler did all the investigation for the story. Anyway, I could follow the breadcrumbs. So I went in, and what happened is I found the son of the man who was made famous in the book because the very first night that Norman Mascarello, who's the principal subject of the book, the first time he encountered the flying saucer, he was out in front of this farmhouse, and he knocked on the door to try to be let in because the flying saucer was 100 feet over his head. But the family didn't let him in. So now this is 65, 75, 85, 95, 05, 43 years later, I show up at this farmhouse, and there's a man living there who turns out to be the son of the man made famous in the book.
Wow.
And I explain who I am, show him my Air Force credentials. I tell him, I'm fascinated by this thing. I find out who he is. He takes me around the property like I'm his best friend. Takes me to the rear of the property and shows me where the flying saucer was hiding during the daytime.
Wow.
Tells a story of how he was living there. His dad answered the door. Dad didn't answer the door when Mascarello was pounding on it, wanting to be let in that night. He introduced me to a guy who, one, saw the UFO, two, who eventually owned the property on the dining farm, which was the adjoining farm. And that night, the flying saucer hovered over that barnyard area. The horses and all the livestock went crazy, and the horses nearly destroyed their paddocks that night. Kicked the holes in them. Well, this guy, whose dad was the famous guy in the book, he took me to meet his friend, and his friend told me the whole story. His friend owned that farm for many, many years and told me he bought it shortly thereafter. The reason that this guy couldn't come forward, he had a very high-profile job, and he couldn't be a witness way back then.
Right.
In fact, he asked me to hide his name when I wrote the story for my first book.
Yeah. So, while you were still in, I mean, was this something that you talked about openly while you were still working at Wright-Pat, or was this something that you had to be careful of?
There was an 8.5 by 11 mimeograph sheet, and the top of it, the title is Air Force UFO Identification Chart. And there's about 12 images on it. Like
I've seen that.
The
Yeah,
Klingon,
I've seen this.
It's pretty funny.
the Klingon battleship, and they're all listed as weather balloon, and then the picture of the weather balloon says swamp gas underneath.
Yeah.
Well, those of us who were cool with the topic would put that up in a conspicuous place in our office on a bulletin board or someplace where a passerby could see it. If you saw that in somebody's office, it was the sign that you could go in and discuss the topic.
Let's chat.
Let's chat.
Shall
Close
we?
the door.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I saw your little sign there. Like, yeah, come on in. Got a cup of coffee? You want a cup of tea? So that was the way it worked. And to answer your question, I know I kind of, got off the topic. When I went looking to poke holes in these stories, because are there aliens? Yes. Aliens, maybe. Aliens, no. I didn't care.
Yeah.
All I wanted to know was, is there any truth to this rumor? So I chose high-profile cases like Exeter, Travis Walton, Rendlesham Forest, and Wright-Patterson to debunk, to shoot holes in it. And then when I found out the opposite was happening, I was building more evidence to support the cases, I thought, I got some stuff here that I think people would really be interested in. I think I could make a contribution to the understanding of what's going on here.
Yeah.
And that's how the first book happened. It literally was spontaneous, never planned. Nobody recommended it. It's just one night going, I got to do this.
So once you got the books out, have you had people approach you from Wright-Pat or other military people to talk about maybe things that they witnessed or things that they've heard?
Absolutely.
Do you mind sharing some of those stories?
Absolutely not.
Oh, he said it's for a future book, maybe.
Yeah.
Wow, that's I can respect that. How is
and it's not all aliens or flying saucers either. There
I
were just
gotcha.
guys that had things on their chests and they wanted to get
Yeah.
them off, and they didn't tell me to keep them secret. In
Yeah.
fact, a couple guys told me things, hoping after my new book come out that I would make them public, and I won't. It's not my thing. It's not my call. It's
Yeah.
not my job. I won't do it. And they were misguided in giving me the information, but
Oh, wow.
um, I'm not going to reveal it.
Yeah.
It's yeah. There's no point. There's absolutely no
I
point.
gotcha. All right.
Now, I might have missed this. Do I sound good, Mike?
Yep. Yep. You're good.
Yep, you do.
And Ray, sorry about the technical issues, but I don't know what was going on. But
It's okay.
They're after us.
They're after
uh,
us.
I mean, it's the only thing that makes sense. But I don't know if I missed this already. But you know, you're kind of talking about the research you were doing. Have you run into any issues while actively doing the research? I think I heard from one of your stories that one night you had someone approach you in a car and kind of nicely tell you to leave the area. It was I think
Yes, that
you know the
Christian.
story I'm talking about.
I do. Would you like to
Okay.
hear it?
Yeah,
Sure.
it's just great. It's a great story.
It is, and in fact, the gory details are in 50 Shades, but it's worth repeating because it's one of those things that happen that makes research cool.
Hmm.
Um, uh, the road, Amesbury Road, which goes into Exeter, is the road that Norman Muscarella was hitchhiking on around midnight or so. And if Amesbury goes north-south,
Hmm.
this little tiny road that's engulfed, a dirt road that's engulfed by trees, goes east-west and tees into it. So there's the two farmhouses there that were involved in the sighting, and then across the street is this road that tees into it, and this would be on the southwest corner was an open lot. And I had gone there a couple of days because I wanted at day and night, early morning or late at night, to get the ambiance of this. I wanted to feel
Yeah.
what Norman Muscarello felt, especially at night. So I went back there, and now this was days after I'd already got the interview with the guy who was in the farmhouse.
Hmm.
So I get to the spot, which was bare naked, like a field.
Hmm.
And when I get there on that particular night, there was equipment there, including this massive 25-foot long Komatsu front loader with
Yeah.
all the implements, like street sweepers and ditch diggers and like
Hmm.
dozens of these things. Specifically, my impression was to keep anybody from parking there.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I could have probably, without having the police called on me, parked back in the driveway, where I did the interview. But I decided to park in this field. So I did the Mike Myers golf cart thing that he did in the movie.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I got my rental car in between this big Komatsu front loader, the picture of which is in the book, and some trees back there. So I'm sitting in there knowing there's a threat now because I've been warned you're
Yeah.
not supposed to park there. And as I'm sitting there looking straight out ahead from the right side, which would be, let's say, southbound, I saw what appeared to be the headlights of a car. But as they approached that road and they would have crossed right in front of my eyes, the lights blinked out. And my window was rolled down because this was like middle of September, right? And so it was a pleasant night, and the window was rolled down, and I was thinking, well, what am I going to do next? Well, I know I was going to go out and photograph that implements of mass construction there, that Komatsu front loader.
Hmm.
But without warning, I heard a female voice, and the female voice says, "Hi," and like I was shocked. It was so
Yeah.
dark, you could not see your hand in front of your face. And I'm hard of hearing, and this was my bad ear that was facing the window. So I go, "Hi." And the woman, this conversation ensues. And in the conversation, I try to explain to her who I am, what I'm doing there. I'm from the Air Force. I'm interested in this thing. I'm not the investigator. I'm not the debunker.
Hmm.
I'm just a truth seeker. And she says to me, they're not coming back.
Oh wow.
And of course I knew who she was talking about. And I go, well, I didn't think they were, but and I explained further that I just wanted to feel what it was like to be a Norman Muscarello down this road at midnight.
Right.
Give
kind
her
of
the
get that-
pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, give her the.
I want to
give
be in
it-
his boots.
and hope she doesn't reach and claw my face off,
Yeah.
because I don't know who's talking to me.
I was about to say, you're not aware, you're not seeing anybody physically.
Literally, I looked out the driver's window because I'm parked. Okay, if I was coming eastbound, I'm parked on the south side of the road, so my window is next to the road.
Yeah.
I'm next to the road there, and the front loader and all the equipment is in front of me and around to the right, and the tree line is behind me. And obviously, this person is standing right outside my window, but I can't see them.
Creepy.
And I didn't hear a car tire. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm putting it all together in real time, thinking, well, what must have happened is that those lights I saw to my right just moments before, they shut their lights off and they came down this tree line road, very narrow road, in the pitch of night, pulled up next to me. And I'm thinking, well, who is this person who is going to engage me? They can't even see me.
Yeah.
So they must have felt awfully safe there.
Yeah. So you're saying you couldn't even, like, you wouldn't have even been able to see a car pull up next to you?
Never couldn't hear it, couldn't see it.
See,
So
from that story, I kind of feel like maybe she was already there, and that vehicle, she might have called for backup or something, like, hey, like, he's here, which is already weird enough that she knows why you're there. And then she probably like approached the car on foot. Where, just to me, I just feel like you would have been able to see a car, pass by. But I mean, if it was that dark,
Yeah.
or her shutting the lights off at that point was a signal for somebody to come out of the woods and
Yeah.
have that conversation with
Yeah.
me. It could have been a second party, but nonetheless, I'm thinking, all right, I need to get out of here as soon as I can, because I've been warned, because someone
Yeah.
put this equipment here. Now I have a greeting party saying, well, you didn't get the warning, so I'm telling you they're not coming back. And that's a warning, like, you need to leave. So I did my photography real quick, jumped in the car, and I went back. But the actual details, as best I could remember them, I tried to put in the book. But it's one of those things that really makes research interesting. And then, of
Yeah.
course, after that, I had to go into town and have a stiff one.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I gotta ask, have you ever had any personal, in any type of UFO encounters yourself? Have you ever seen anything? Have you ever experienced anything?
Yeah, actually, two of them. One very distant, and one very close up.
Oh, wow.
I was coming home from I had a traffic accident in 2010, and in December of 2011, I was coming back from a therapy appointment. I was about a mile from my home on a 4-lane, kind of a residential thoroughfare, and the moon roof shade was pulled back, and I saw something disturb that light that comes through there. Now, behind me was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, like, a couple of miles behind me, and there's big planes coming through there all the time, but I didn't hear it. So I thought, well, the windows are rolled up. It's the first week of December. It's chilly, so maybe I just couldn't hear it, And then I looked down to see, and I saw a craft for about 7 or 8 seconds, about 90 feet across. And in one of my books, I actually drew the thing out and I tell the story. It glided. We had real low clouds, maybe 100 feet off the ground that day, and it just missed a 2-story building and slipped into the clouds. And it blew my mind. Totally blew my mind. And I was going that direction. So as the light changed, and now because I was stopped at the light, so I got to watch it. And now I'm trying to look up to my right. I'm trying to look through the windshield and part of the roof, and I never saw it again. But it was a couple 100 feet off the ground, tops, and only 200 feet in front of me.
Yeah, it really stuns you when you see something like that. I kind of have a personal experience where
we both do.
Yeah, like where I was
Really?
probably about I was probably about maybe maybe 100, 150 yards away from something that was like right over these tree lines. In fact, my dad was with me. Saw it with me, and we actually pulled over because it was such a bright light, and we turned the car off and we couldn't hear anything. I'd like to go into detail about it maybe on another episode, but
I'm gonna make him.
yeah, I want to bring I want to bring my dad on. That way we can.
It's actually pretty interesting. I think he was actually abducted, and I'm not even kidding. Even he has a hard time buying that. But I'm like, you have all the classic symptoms of someone who was abducted, and I'm being very serious.
I don't know. Personally, I don't feel like, but we'll get in that one episode.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I mean, it was right there. I mean, we watched it hover across this road. It was at a standstill, hovered across the road, stopped again, crossed back to where it was previously, and then, I mean, this all probably took place in about 2 minutes, or maybe like 2 or 5 minutes. But when it crossed back to where it was, from a standpoint, hover, it zipped off into like space faster than I've ever seen anything move. I mean, it looked like watching a shooting star, and there was no noise, no propulsion, no wind created. I mean, it was pretty freaky, and like me and my dad still kind of have conversations about it today. And it's just like when you see something like that, it just kind of takes you back, shocks you, and
it's life changing.
Yeah, you start questioning some things.
Have you filed a report with anybody?
No, I was probably around 15 or 16 years old at the time. I didn't even know you could do stuff like that. You know,
and I don't even know how many people actually, you know, as a UFO enthusiast and amongst other things, you got to think. I would only imagine maybe 10% tops would file reports of actually seeing UFO. I mean, I've seen several UFOs, and I've never even thought about filing. Actually, my last one, I saw one on New Year's Eve. Maybe I'll try to pull that video up. I actually filed a UFO report with Sigma, I do believe. I think it was a new. It wasn't with MUFON. It was a different reporting system that just came out, and they created this new database. I'll have to see exactly which one it was that I had. But yeah, I don't think that many people actually report, you know?
I would recommend the National UFO Reporting Center, NUFORC. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think it's important, even if it's 30 years ago, to file your report. When researchers like myself are looking for breadcrumbs or corroboration of stories, we go to the different databases, which can be queried by dates and type and that sort of thing. So you putting that data point in could help somebody solve a problem or give them just cause to perhaps interview somebody they might have ignored. It's really amazing how that little grain of sand builds up into a beach after a while. So please, Peter Davenport is in charge, and Peter has helped me out. In fact, let me tell you a really quick story. When I was writing Victoria's Secret Truth, that's book number 2, I was looking through reports to try to pinpoint when she might have had some of her experiences. And it was corroboration in a way, but it was also, could I find other witnesses? And there was this beauty of a report that synced up perfectly with Victoria's story. So I contacted Peter Davenport and I said, is there any way I can contact the person who did this report? And it turned out to be a gold mine. Peter, he was the intermediary, contacted this guy. The guy wanted to talk to me, and it was gold. It really not only corroborated what Victoria had told me, but it showed me how much activity was in that area during that time period. So if you would, you might help somebody in the future. And I think that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. I'll probably definitely do that. I need to ask my dad, because I know after that event happened, I did notice he started listening to and going on the Coast to Coast website very frequently. But he never really talked about it. My dad's kind of a quiet guy. He kind of very private. And I mean, there's probably like a couple years that went by where we never really talked about it. But I could never get my mind off of it. I was just like, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. And
well, it's funny how, you hear that story over and over again, where it's like what you just said, where we just really didn't talk about it. It's such a it rocks people's reality to a degree where it's like, you know what? Let's just pretend that never happened for some people. For me, I embrace, what I saw was extremely life changing. So,
Yeah. Do you feel like as you delved into this research, there was reasons why you started experiencing these things more? Maybe that was like a catalyst for these interactions you were having.
Um, no, I think I just put myself in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Um, and weird things have happened to me, like, man, that was too easy. It's almost like somebody's leading me,
yeah.
and they want me to tell these stories, and we could get into that later. But I just was super curious, and then I met Victoria by chance at the International UFO Congress
Hmm.
in Fountain Hills, and they were the first. Her and her boyfriend at the time were the first two people I met at the conference. I literally had sat down for the first talk, and they sat next to me. And was it fate? Were they sent to me? They didn't know me from
Yeah.
Adam. And next thing I know, and this was before my first book was out. I was literally a nobody in this field. I was just a guy who worked at Wright-Patterson, and nobody knew that. And then 5 or 6 years later, I'm writing a book about her because we have a conversation, and suddenly I discovered she's showing all the signs of being an abductee. One thing
Hmm.
leads to another, and we build up a bond of trust, and she's showing me all her evidence, and I do it's very strange the way this thing keeps snowballing. And then
Yeah.
I find Colonel Carroll, and he's dying of cancer, and he wants to tell somebody a story of intercepting the famous swamp gas UFO. And
Hmm.
one thing leads to another, and I'm in his house interviewing him, and the rest is history. It is mind boggling how things have fallen into place so readily for me. It makes me suspicious.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like you have to wonder like how many coincidences have to happen before you start thinking, okay, something's up. And I literally was just having a conversation with someone about this, and it was just like kind of off topic, just like the stuff going on in Hawaii. There's all these like weird things going on, and not saying like there's a conspiracy or anything behind there, but it's just like how many consistent or like
Synchronicities is
yeah,
how
how
I
many
call
of
them.
those does it take before you can go, okay, this is weird. We need to look into this more in
Yeah.
a different light.
Stuff happens. Everything, again, the seed was my intellectual curiosity. And then I went to my first conference, and my mind was blown. The people I met, outside in the social circles telling me stories, and my mind was blown. So, it just seemed, in fact, the first two people I met in this whole UFO world was Kathleen Martin and Stanton Friedman,
Wow.
because I showed up a day early, and I just, I didn't want to be jet lagged and then miss half the day of conference. So I came
Hmm.
in the night before, and they were in the expo center setting up, and I recognized Stanton immediately.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
started, yeah, and I started a conversation with him and Kathleen, and I helped them haul books. I'm
Ah,
hauling books for them,
that's
bringing it
awesome.
into the expo,
That's a
and
campfire story all by itself.
it was, and I became friends with Stanton and Kathleen.
That's so
Um,
cool.
so they didn't know me, but it just seemed like everybody I met became the next step.
Yeah.
Um, it just fascinating, and so it goes. So
For
it
you
goes.
personally, I mean, how has this changed you on your view of reality and what is possible? I mean, over the years, the decades of doing this, I mean, it really shakes things up, the more you dig into it. But how has this changed your viewpoint of what's going on and even reality itself, so to speak?
Really, not at all, and I'll tell you why. I watched the um, the debunkers. There's always UFO shows on for decades, right?
Sure.
And I was reading a lot of books by. Turns out I didn't know they were the prominent people at the time, but the good people
Yeah.
trying to tell the truth. And then you watch ABC News, and those jerk offs at the uh, that they paid off come on and say the
Yeah.
stupidest things.
Oh, absolutely.
And it became, James McGahad and Seth Shitstack, or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
And it became apparent that only the idiots and the liars were allowed their 5 minutes of fame on these
Yeah.
shows.
It's funny
And I
how that
thought,
works.
yeah, the dumb people are
Yeah.
obviously lying about this, and they're lying bad. So there's got to be some truth to this, else they wouldn't put their faces out there and lie. Well, they're getting paid, of course, but and so early on, it became obvious to me from what I was reading and that sort of thing that there was some basis in fact, most definitely. And even before this happened, I was able to give photographs that I discovered that, in the public, get some good copies of that. I was able to take the people who were in the photo analysis world, and I got some positive feedback, like, it's really an interesting photo. We don't have the negative, but if you can dig the background on this and find out who was there and who took the photo and stuff, there could be some basis into what they're saying. So it was those kind of things in the background, long before I went to my first conference. So putting all that together, you just kind of know that there's a reality to it, and the cover up was extremely thin and poorly orchestrated and poorly represented, and you just apply 5 minutes of logic to it, and you can see right through it.
Yeah, and especially the times we're living in now. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better time to be alive when it involves the UFO topic. What are your thoughts on how rapidly? I mean, did you ever believe that we would be having congressional hearings? I mean, we just had those a week or two ago on the subject. What are your thoughts on how fast things have been developing recently?
First answer is no. I didn't think of, because even a couple months beforehand, somebody asked me that on the show. I said probably not in my lifetime. Now this had to be, this was, I didn't say a couple months ago. This was a couple months before the Office of the Director of National Intelligence put out that 9-page report that said flying saucers are real, safety of flight hazard, national security issue. So it was a couple months before that when they asked me. I think it might have been in April, right when I released Swamp Gas book. So, no, never thought that was going to happen. Now, the fact that it's happening very rapidly, maybe too fast, because
it is fast. That is for sure.
And the reason is the people in charge don't have a clue.
No.
Those guys that were up in May or whatever, every
clue.
answer was, I don't know, or it's classified.
Yeah.
And they ask them simple questions. That one representative asked them a simple question, and I don't have it memorized. They asked them like, what do you think about the famous 1965 Exeter incident?
And they're like, huh? Excuse me?
Don't know about that. Well,
like,
how about
aren't you the guys in charge of figuring this out? Like, they're like, what's going on? I think they asked them about Maelstrom Air Force Base, and they're like, I'm not really sure. We don't really have much on that. I think about
one of the biggest cases in history, and probably Salas was
clueless.
Totally clueless. So it reminds me of a guy that we did a conference in Paris. We all wrote a paper, and I was the front guy. So I went in, got the hotel rooms, established where we were going to eat and everything. And I knew Paris. I had several visits there. I knew the underground. He always wanted to be the leader. And he'd always jump on the wrong side of the tracks to take the train. No, come here. We come up from the metro. We're heading to the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which is over my right shoulder, which I knew that. You cannot miss the Cathedral of Notre Dame when you step out of the metro. No, it's this way. And he's running in the other direction. All right. I'm hoping that's not the case here.
Yeah.
Where they're clueless, but they're going to run as fast as they can to get wherever they think they need to go.
Yeah.
And it's probably the wrong direction.
Yeah, and it's mind-boggling that this can even happen, and people are still not paying attention to it, or even take it serious at all. I mean, it's like you would have thought that that would have been the world headline for weeks on weeks, especially with the Grush, the breaking story with that. I mean, with that guy and his credentials and who he was and the caliber of man in the intelligence world of what he did would be extremely striking, but yet people are just, that's not good enough. It always seems to be a case that it's just never good enough, no matter what it is. I think they could probably, I mean, you see the videos they release, it's still not good enough. Nothing is ever good enough. And people, I think today have such a short attention span that it's just like, oh, okay. And then off to the next, it's like, it boggles my mind that we can be at this point in time in human history talking about these things and people are still clueless and don't really care.
I think it would
Well,
have to. Oh, I'm sorry. Keep.
no, you, Christian.
Yeah, I think. I think it won't affect, or it won't have the reaction that we think it will have until it affects our daily lives. Like, even like you said, they don't care. They could have video of them landing next to the president, coming down, giving a speech, and they're still gonna be like, I don't know about this,
Yeah.
And I think it's good to be skeptical, even if you do see something like that, because you never really know, especially nowadays. But it is a little surprising. But I think people are going to be more accepting of it if it affects their daily lives. Like if they
I think
come,
I think it would have to.
yeah, they're going to have to bring like renewable energy or some kind of new technology that where you don't have to pay your bills or your taxes anymore,
Yeah.
and then people are going to be like, okay, like these are the aliens we've been wanting. But if you still got to go to work on Monday, man, it's like whatever.
Well,
Exactly. You made it. If it raises the cost of eggs, bread, and milk, they're going to pay attention.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up technology because obviously, if they've had these things over at Wright-Patterson, which I believe they have, in historically speaking, there's got to be technology connected to that, and it makes you wonder if any of that's been reverse engineered. Where is that technology, and how far advanced have we developed that technology? There's got to be some worldly implications if that technology has been suppressed, hidden, or just been strictly used for military purposes. There's always a lot of rumors that, oh, this is where we got fiber optics from. That was the big rumor for Roswell, amongst some other things. What are your thoughts on, being an engineer, that they've had to have some type of developments if they've actually recovered this type of debris and crash craft, there has to have been something that they've learned from it.
Well, it sounds logical. There was also the transistor was invented because they recovered some solid state stuff off the craft, and then they were finally able to reverse engineer into solid state. I decided to take that to bedrock one day, and there was a guy, I'll call him Dr. Bill. I won't give you his last name, but he is retired now from the lab, and it was his job basically to bring solid state into the Air Force weaponry. And he was their ground zero. And he was PhD, bright guy, played basketball against him at the gym all the time. So he knew who I was. And I looked him up one day and I said, hey, I'd really like to get together and talk to you about, technology. He goes, sure. So meet me at the gym. Now he's old retired. I'm old retired. So I went up to the gym. And the question I asked him was, I said, look, I think at the time I had 2 books out, and I told him about that. And I had a card. I gave him the card. He's like, ooh. And he knew who I was, but we only crossed paths in the gym because we were in different directorates. Well, no, divisions, actually. And I said, there was a rumor that Bell Labs was seeded solid state technology recovered from a crashed alien craft, and that they reverse engineer it. Mm-hmm. And they had been looking at solid state, but the rumor was that they didn't know how to dope the substrate, and that when they reverse engineered what they had received, they realized, and again, these are not specifics that are true, but just as examples,
Right.
Instead of doping it with selenium, they decided to dope it with arsenic, and voila, the transistor was born, and they could now control a whole bunch of stuff out here with a little bit of control back there at the input. And so I asked him about that possibility, and, kind of put the hand on the shoulder and said, hey, the transistor and all the stuff we developed here, all the solid state stuff, was the result of hard human work. He said, if somebody had gotten and reverse engineered that, and that's how we got to this point, I would know about it. And nobody ever told me, and I work with those guys from Bell Labs, to move their stuff along. Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't expect him to tell me the truth if he knew,
Right.
but I don't think he would open lie to me because he had nothing to cover up. Maybe he thought I was going to put his name in a future book or something.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of digging that I've done where people have said who are in the right position to do so. They
Yeah.
literally were at the forefront of developing solid state for the Air
Yeah.
Force. He protects it. He protects his instruments in business. All right. Think about that. So if there is technology out there, I would think that for purely economic reasons, the United States would be good to keep their big trap shut and just leak it to the people here for the benefit of Americans. That's my take. Because I don't see other countries stepping forward and go, the Russians, hey, we got this new stuff, Oh, that's sorry, that's Italian,
Yeah.
and giving us stuff. Then why should we give it away? I don't
Right.
understand that. So they can bomb us easier? No, I don't think so. So if we are reverse engineering it, that's not a demand I would ever make.
Yeah.
I don't see the positive in that as an American citizen.
Yeah. So obviously you've expanded past Wright-Patterson in your books. How did you get into the alien abductee stuff?
My very first conference, a lady by the name of Victoria sat next to me with her boyfriend, and they were an interesting couple because he was from Australia, and there was the first break, and there was 15 minutes, and so we're in the chair. Hi, I'm Ray, whatever, I'm Air Force, former Air Force, and then he turns to her and says, "Should I tell him?" And I'm thinking, dude, what?
Should I tell? Is this fly
Should
down?
I tell him? I just met them. That's it. 5 minutes. I just met
Yeah.
them, and she goes, "Okay, I guess it's okay." Like they didn't know me from Adam, and he goes, "My girlfriend here thinks she has children living on an alien spaceship."
Wow. It's pretty heavy duty.
For the first hour of your first conference.
Yeah.
And I thought, if this happens in the first hour, I can't wait to see what happens over the next 6 days.
All right. Not a dull moment.
Getting your money's
So
worth.
I saw them off and on, like, just socially here and there, or they show up and,
Yeah.
chat, but never anything really real. And then over the next couple of years, I would see them together and, hi, how are you? Same place, a year later and whatever. And then I had a chance, I guess her boyfriend had to fly home, and I had a chance to socialize with her for about an hour. And I said, well, what's your interest in all of this? And she went on to tell me, well, I have these strange memories of visitation when I was a child and strange things and blah, 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 blah. So I said, oh, well, that's really interesting. And then just watching people like Kathleen Martin and Dr. Leo Sprinkle and Yvonne Smith and Dr. David Jacobs in panels and presentations, I started to get this spidey sense about abductions. And, I could spend 10 minutes with Christian and I could figure out if you are or you aren't. That's just...
Oh, we should do it.
This may be the time for you to open up, Christian.
Well, look, I'll tell you my, just real quick, the reason why I'm pretty sure I never was abducted was because
I think different, but
so me and my dad, like, we were driving down this road. I'm not going to get into it. We saw the light from far away, and we were getting closer to it. And anyways, I was on the way to a basketball game, and my dad was taking me. Obviously, I can't drive at the time. I was too young, and we made it to the game on time. I mean, like I said, the whole interaction was probably no more than 5 minutes long, and like there was never like any time loss. It was, we were in pretty much full conversation with each other the whole time. So, if there had been like a big amount of time that we couldn't remember or something strange like that, or we showed up to the rec game and it was over, then I'd be like, okay, something really weird happened, but none of that happened. That wasn't the case. So I've always been pretty adamant on being like, I wasn't abducted, or I never felt like I was. But
not having missing time rules against an abduction. That's pretty standard.
I thought there was a second. I thought there was a second sighting though.
Oh yeah. Okay. So
that's where things get interesting.
That's a little different. See, I'm not 100% sure exactly when the second thing happened, but it was either a couple days or a couple weeks later. But that's a long story. I don't know if you want to get into that, but if you want to, I can. But
I mean,
Well, this is probably not the place, but we should get another session together and we'll talk about alien abductions and stuff because
Yeah.
my presentation in a week and a half at the MUFON International UFO Conference is all about abductions. And I'm not an abductee, but having written a book and done the
yeah,
research, I have a huge checklist of stuff that I've done and people I've talked to, abductees, a lot of stories that I've investigated myself. So if you know like to have me on again in the future,
absolutely.
we can do that, and we would make you the point of the conversation, and we'll just kind of sit back and maybe try to understand your story if that's okay with you guys.
yeah.
Absolutely.
If you want that, I mean, I'm more than willing. Maybe I can
I'd
get
be
my
happy
dad to
to.
come on too. That way we can have his perspective.
Awesome. Oh,
Yeah,
that'd be
because
great.
the second sighting of it, that's where it wasn't the first one. The first sighting didn't give me any warning bells of abduction, but it was the second one that I was like, you know what? I've heard of lots of
Yeah.
abduction stories, and that is almost identical to what I've heard. But you got some conferences coming up, right, Ray?
Yes, the last weekend in August at the Covington, Kentucky Convention Center. It's the MUFON Symposium, and they have 2 days of speakers, world class. And I'm not talking about myself in that category, but world class speakers, great events, a free movie going to be shown there, which is one of the new releases from Ron James. Avi Loeb, the Harvard
Oh yeah,
astronomer, is going to do. I think he's going to do a Zoom. I don't think he's going to be there in
that's
person,
cool.
but it's just as good. It's a cheap place to stay. I don't know as conference costs go, how good that's going to be. But I'm going to be in a
Yeah.
panel session on Saturday, and I'm going to be on a panel that addresses the question whether screen memories are a weapon or a tool. And then I am doing a talk on Sunday about varying perceptions of alien intent. And not only do I introduce 6 of the world's best abduction researchers and who they are, what they did, and their opinions on the topic, but I have 4 people who confided in me that I've researched. And although I have all of them on video or audio, I have 2 extensive videos that I'm going to play. Both of these videos are the first time they've ever been seen anywhere. So
Wow.
people are going to be able to, I think you can log in and do a Zoom and participate that way if you like. I haven't checked their website lately on what the requirements are, but that's going to happen. And I'm very, very excited because, MUFON's been doing the Air Force's job since 1969, or
Yeah.
so it says on their T-shirts.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very excited for that. And then the following weekend, I don't know if you've heard of the Flatwoods, West Virginia monster,
Yes,
the
yes, I
UFO that
have.
crashed. Well, they're having the first ever Flatwoods UFO conference, and
Oh,
I,
that's cool.
I met Dave Spinks and his girlfriend Serenity Jenny when we did a talk, a little boutique conference together down in Kentucky last summer, and we hit it off. And they said, "Oh, and they're having Stan Gordon there, Mr. Kecksburg
I,
himself."
I have Stan coming on the show in October.
That's
Very,
awesome.
very excited to talk to him. He's a legend. He's an OG, man. I love him.
He is, and so I'm really looking forward to sharing the podium with him. So
That's
those
awesome.
are the 2 that I have, and I was going to make an announcement, and regrettably, it did not come to fruition. I was enlisted to be a speaker at the very first Wright-Patterson Air Force Base UFO conference,
Whoa.
which was
And that
supposed
was going to be on site.
on site on the
Wow.
24th, that weekend, 24th, 25th of September. And it was going to be held at the Hope Hotel, which the Hope Hotel is where, they held those Bosnian peace talks and they settled that all out. And what they did is they carved out a little piece of Wright-Patterson right at the front gate there. And it's all fenced off with this great security. And so they can host public events there. It's on Wright-Pat. It's
Mm-hmm.
federal property, but you don't have to go through the base to get on. There's a little thing that they flag you through. So it was going to be held there the last full weekend of September, I think. And fortunately, I got a text last week that the organizer is in the hospital and will be for the next 6 to 8 weeks. He has some kind of blood infection or
Oh,
something.
wow.
And his developer said, I can't handle this. So it was going to be myself, Tom Carey,
Yeah.
and James Fox
Oh, wow.
was going to do a thing. And unfortunately, it got canceled. So they're busily and hastily trying to figure out when they can redo this.
Restructure it.
Yeah, and I'm hoping maybe spring of next year, but I will certainly let everybody out there know if that's going to happen. I was hoping to announce it.
I know, because you were telling me pre-show, you were like, I got an announcement that I'm going to try to do if it actually happens. So I was keeping my fingers crossed. But you know what? Hopefully I'm sure it'll pan out in the future, and you guys be able to do that.
So those are the two coming up, and I really had the life schedule because I have a new grandson, and I'm going to be visiting him a lot in another state, and I've got some other
Congratulations on
things
that.
I've always wanted to do. So those are coming up.
Yeah.
So in your research, what do you think these things are that we're seeing? Or do you think they're little green men in spaceships? Do you think they're interdimensional beings? I mean, there's so many different ideas that people have of them, but through your research, like, what do you believe these events are that are happening?
You ever see that meme with Giorgio Tsoukalos, and it goes, I don't want to say they're aliens. At the
But it's
bottom of the meme, it
aliens.
goes, but it's aliens. The Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is probably the correct explanation.
Yeah.
And in this case, you have to look at all the evidence. Some you can throw out because they're so anomalistic, they just don't make sense for anything. But given all the evidence, given all the reports, the best answer is something that's not human.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if they're interdimensional or they have this great physics and they know about wormholes, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
They're here. They've been here.
Yeah.
They hide. They don't want their presence known because they're here to do an alien human hybridization program. And if
Hang
they
on, hang on. Back that up. Well, you said they're here for what?
Yes, my talk in MUFON in a week and a half is all about the witnesses and the experts taking their evidence of what they know, and they've all universally come to the conclusion that the reason that this is happening is to support an alien human hybridization program.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, that's you do hear a lot when you hear from abductees or alleged abductees, is that seems to be the common kind of thing that they're told, even by these beings. And it's interesting, like even when Grush was having his testimony to Congress, it was, instead of saying aliens, it was non-human intelligence, and that is the new term that is being slung around. You can take that any way you want it. I mean, maybe that means they're not necessarily from somewhere else. Maybe they've been here the entire time. Who knows? It's an interesting term. But yeah, hopefully we'll find out soon.
That's kind of a bombshell you just dropped.
Well, I did the research. I've talked to the experts, and that's the only conclusion that I can come to. Nothing else makes sense. Yeah. And in fact, Victoria, for example, Victoria says, I've got her on tape. She says, I know that I'm part of an alien human hybridization program, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre. I mean, she knows it's happening. She's under regression. Her regressions corroborate a lot of what she had some conscious memories of. She said, they're taking my eggs. They tell me I'm special, that I'm helping them, that they need to do this. And I have her I have her regressions, her recorded regressions,
Wow.
and I have her testimony to me, evaluating those regressions, and simply, she knows it's happening. Now, Christian, after your event, and we'll just leave you with something to contemplate. Did you
You're about to freak me out here.
sleep well tonight, son?
Yeah.
Did you have somebody examine you to see if you have any maybe unusual markings, a scoop mark, for example, or something in a triangular form, like 3 dots in a triangular form, or maybe a little red image of a triangle? Has somebody looked over the back of your shin and your leg, and places that maybe you don't look at every day in the mirror?
Well, let me check real quick. Now, no, as far as I'm aware, I am untouched, unscathed. I never noticed any markings. I never noticed any like weird thing form on my body. The only thing that I would say was weird was I just would have this reoccurring nightmare. It's not really even a nightmare. It was almost kind of like a funny situation. But of course, there's like these aliens at the end of it that are involved. And I've never had a reoccurring dream before, except for this one thing, and it
Just keeps checking them off.
yeah.
Were you having mad sex with a Nordic alien?
Bright blue
No.
eyes, maybe.
It was not that awesome of a dream.
Beautiful blonde hair.
I probably
we're
would
gonna
have I probably would have much preferred that, but no, it was it was kind of stupid dream, to be honest. Like the beginning of it was really weird and dumb, but I don't know.
It's up to you guys. It's up to you guys if you want to breach this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I can. You want to know the dream? I can tell it to you.
Absolutely, if you don't
Let's
mind
do it.
telling the whole world.
Oh God, this is so stupid.
That's
I think
okay.
it's not stupid.
No,
It's your
it is.
choice.
I remember I would tell my mom, like, this is the weirdest dream I have. So like in the dream, let me think how it goes. So I'm in this like museum, and there's like an art museum, and there's like an archway in front of me. And above the room, there's a sign, and it says like, please, whatever you do, don't steal anything in the room. Then I go in there, and of course I steal something. And there's like an exit door on the other side of the room. And above that sign, it's like, please do not steal anything. You have been warned. There will be repercussions. And of course, I go right through the door. And when I go through that door, I'm then at the end of my street, my parents' street, that where I used to live. And I'm just start walking home down the street. And of course, all of a sudden, I just hear like this, like, almost like a helicopter noise, but it's like a wind, like swooshing. And I turn around, and it's just this damn giant UFO. And I'm like, oh shit. So I start running. I get into my house, and I'm like, damn it, why did I steal that thing? I should have just listened. And anyways, so I get in the house. I'm like freaking out, And in this house, dream house, there's like a skylight. And I like look over, and the UFO's hovering there, and it like dips down, like it's like looking down at me. And then these like doors open, like a window, I should say. And there's like, I can see these 2 shadows looking at me. It's like these 2 figures, right? And then next thing I know, I like wake up, and I'm on a table, like strapped down. Yeah, okay, but the thing about this is, man, is like I'd seen so many of these damn alien shows and shit where people talk about this stuff, so it could have just been like all in my head. Anyways, like I'm like looking over, and like in a comic book or something, I look over, and there's like my whole family in these like tubes, right? I mean, it's like something out of like a cheesy movie. And I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. Like I'm like freaking out, and then by the time I turn around, there's like this tall alien. I can't even remember exactly what they look like, but it was, I just remember it was like much taller than I thought. And it had this instrument, and it was just like coming towards me. And then, I'm like, oh my God, no. And then I wake up like right then, and I'm just, and I probably had that dream 15 times, and it went exactly the same way every time. And I was like, like, what the fuck? I was just
And
like,
have you ever historically in your life have repetitive dreams? Like I'm not other than that one. I'm just saying.
no, the only other one I had was about like some dinosaurs or something. That I know what that is. I'm like a huge when I was growing up, man, I was like all into dinosaurs. Jurassic Park was my shit, and that was like just me in a mall, and there's like dinosaurs chasing me, and that was like the only other one, but it was never as frequent as this one.
Let
And
me
When
ask
did
you
those?
this. Let me ask you this. Typically, when you dream, if you're like me, my dreams tend to fade very quickly. It's hard to remember, 20 minutes after you wake up, like what you were dreaming about. Do you typically remember your dreams when you dream on average? And what makes that memory so significantly different is being able to remember them compared to other dreams.
are you talking about like right as I wake up or like long
I'm just
after?
saying, obviously, you remember this dream very vividly, which is
Yeah,
rare all in itself.
yeah.
Do you typically remember your dreams like that? If you were to have a dream tonight and you were to dream something, would you remember what you dreamt about that afternoon, the following week? So I'm trying to connect the dots on
I
that.
can remember my dreams pretty well, but not. I wouldn't say for more than like a week or two later. If I'm not
Okay.
sitting there having it over, but like I said, those two dreams have always stood out because they've just been like the same reoccurring thing over and
Yeah.
over. But now I haven't had those dreams, and I mean, it's not like I'm still having them.
Yeah.
But there was a
When,
period
when,
of
when did they?
time. I'm sorry, what?
When did they start? How old were you?
Oh, I was probably around. Well, I know the alien one was happening kind of around that time that the event happened.
Jack.
Yeah, but man, I'm telling you, I had been watching all this stuff on
Yeah, I
TV
know,
about.
but
But
I,
think hard when you might have had that first dream.
somewhere between I was like 14 and 16, somewhere
So
around
right
there.
around the time that you saw the lights in the sky kind of thing with your dad.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. Okay, this is just a knee jerk thing. Um, I would say yes, you definitely had experiences. It's they're very vivid. You've checked off so many boxes. It's very typical of something that happens in abduction and post abduction. A lot of people have night terrors, and you having this dream is one form of that. So just my spidey senses, just
yeah.
off the cuff, would say I think I agree with Mike. I think you may have had some experiences, and the only way you'll know for sure, and maybe not even for sure, but if you find a hypnotic therapist
Hmm.
who can put you in that relaxed state, and you will tell them, hey, I want to explore this dream. And many psychiatrists, psychologists, they know hypnosis too. You'll just find somebody who's open-minded, and you can find a referral somewhere. But if you're interested, and a lot of people go, hey, I don't know what they did to me. I'm cool with the way I am. I don't care. I don't want to investigate it. But if you want to dig further, if you want to maybe get some more certainty to it so you can deal with it, then perhaps you need to have a regression and tell the person, I want to revisit this dream. And then before you go under, you'll tell them
Yeah.
about the dream so that they have a little roadmap and they can develop some questions to kind of bring out other details which are buried deeply or could be buried deeply. But I think I agree with Mike. It's sounding very much like you've had some experience.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have to have severe missing time for something like that to happen. I mean, you could have an experience, an interaction with them, and you don't have to be like, "Hey, where did 5 hours go?" I mean, it's not always the way it goes down. And it's hard to even, wrap your mind around, what they're even able to do as far as what even time is and how they interact with time. So you could be interacting with them for hours and you may not even notice anything gone. I mean, it's a very complex, thing for us to even grasp.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really like cared to, like I said, I've never felt like I was affected that far. But for the sake of the show, I'm all down.
Yeah.
I mean,
Let's
why
do it.
why not? You know,
Yeah.
I'd even be
Yeah.
down to have it recorded.
Yeah.
If I'm
Oh, they would.
if I'm gonna do it, like it, I'm very because I'm kind of skeptical of that stuff, anyways. Like
Well, as you should be.
like those shows where they get like 6 people up there and they like make them hypnotize and they do whatever. I'm like, I don't know about that, man. But I mean, I'm all open. I'm pretty open minded about stuff, so I'm not afraid to. If you know any great people, Ray, please.
The great people I know, two of which are going to be here in Cincinnati on the 25th and 26th. I don't know if those are the dates. I think it's the last weekend. But Kathleen Martin is going to be there, and Yvonne Smith are going to be there, and they are two of the foremost hypnotic regression therapists. Unfortunately, where are you located, Christian?
I'm in Augusta, Georgia.
Because Kathleen is located in Sterling, Florida.
That's not that far, right, Mike?
I'm not. I think it's
it's northwest of Orlando.
Northwest.
It's northwest of Orlando, but Kathleen Martin is one of the foremost hypnotic regressionists, and she's there. Unfortunately, Yvonne's going to be here in Cincy, but she lives out in the Los Angeles area. I'll find out if they know anybody in that area, and then I can get back to you. I can close a loop with you because I'll see Yvonne and Kathleen in a couple of weekends.
Mike, bring your camera.
I will. I would
bring
love
a little cell phone thing. They're great for put it up on a little stand, and they're great for recording testimonies.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if any space babes have been hanging out with me. My deep mind.
You never know.
You just never know.
Is that what a lot of people experience? Is like something that's like sexual or has to do? Because you said it's like an interbreeding thing, and I know you, if I'm correct, you've done some work with the Travis Walton case, correct?
I did.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. But didn't he have something kind of similar to that happen to him, or he was like healed, right?
Right. Travis was with 6 other guys in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in November of 1975, and they saw a craft. They thought it was a fire at first, so they came up the road. They saw it was a craft. Travis got out of the truck, got too close to it, and as it was spinning up whatever power system it uses to go across the cosmos, it let go of an electrostatic charge. It hit him, picked him up 10 feet and blew him back 10 feet, and it burned him all over his body. His guys ran away, and apparently the intelligence in that craft recognized what had happened. So they took Travis aboard for 5 days and they healed him. And then the same intelligence dropped him off on the road, not too far from a payphone. And he went and he was gone for 5 days, and all these guys were getting lie detector tests, and the sheriff was pointing fingers, and so was the family. He calls, he goes, "It's Travis," and his brother goes, "It's bullshit." "No, it's me, Travis. I'm at the phone booth." And that's what happened. So his wasn't a sexual thing, but many of the individuals, in fact, the first case, Betty and Barney Hill.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this.
Barney said they took sperm from him. Betty said they inserted a big needle through her abdomen, and and that they thought was the original way of extracting ovum. So that's a long history, because that's their key objective is this hybridization. And if you want to read a really scary book, but one that I think is extremely truthful about this, read Dr. David Jacobs. It's a book called The Threat. The Threat by Dr. David Jacobs.
I'll put that on my list.
Any of his books is exceptional. Read The Threat. It really distills a lot of things, and he goes more into what the intent is in that book. So do that, miss a few nights of comfortable sleep.
Do you think that interbreeding is to try to merge our societies together? You think that's maybe the purpose of it?
Well, without giving away my entire presentation,
sorry.
I believe, the experts believe, that they're dying. The races are dying out there.
That's what I've heard.
Could be radiological exposure. Could be too many woke people. I don't know what it is. but something has caused them to not be able to replicate.
Yeah.
And in order to keep their DNA alive and not in a vat somewhere, they need to transfer it to us
Oh,
because
that's super interesting.
Yeah. That's what I've
we're
heard
as
some of that
close
too.
as we're as close as anybody. So that's why is because to help save the race. And then
Yeah.
there's all this expand our consciousness stuff
Right.
and new wave stuff that everyone has their own opinion, which
Yeah.
I'm going to reveal during my talk on Sunday during the MUFON conference.
Yeah,
Awesome.
me and Mike, we've kind of had a conversation where we think it might be like our spirituality is a key factor, or
Yeah, it could
at
be
least
key.
a big interest they
Souls.
have. Yeah. Do you ever like see anything like that, or think that has anything to have a part in it?
Well, they could take us over by whatever means they have weapons, which they haven't really shown any weapons.
No.
They can disable our weapons, but they haven't per se shot down beams at us. I'm sure they probably can. But I think you can't do an overt takeover of Earth. There's too many of us, and we would find them and we would kill them. So the way they have to do it is slowly over the weeks, months, decades, and then look at how society's changing. It makes me suspicious. In the threat, Dr. Jacob said they're already here. They're already the hybrids that look
Walking
like
among
us
us.
are in his book, Walking Among Us. And he explains in detail how it's happening, how humans are forced to help them integrate, to teach them how they blend in. And then this just gets replicated. And then eventually the alien gene is the dominant gene and humans are really no more.
Yeah.
So if the government doesn't spend 75 years coming to this realization, like they spent 75 years where they finally went, oh, flying saucers are real. Hopefully it won't be another 75 years where they go, holy crap, this is going on here. I think maybe we need to do something about it.
I think they know a hell of a lot more than what they lead on to. Maybe not everybody in the government, but plenty of people that have been involved with this. I'm sure, without a doubt, they have a very good picture of what's going on. Well, Ray, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Just look up my books, look up the Alien Shades of Grays trilogy. They can look that up on Amazon. And if they want autograph copies, they can find autograph copies at the National Museum of the United States Air Force right here in Dayton, Ohio. Or contact me, at itsaufo@yahoo.com. And, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Come to the conference, bring $15, buy a book, keep me off the streets. I have a website. It's a Wix site. It's Ray Szymanski, at Wix site, but that's not me really. It's just if somebody's looking for me, they can find me there and find my email address there.
That's how I found him.
Did you? I'm keeping this low key because I don't want it to take over my life.
Yeah,
and
I don't
in
blame
fact,
you.
My curiosity is satisfied. They're not messing with me or my kids or my grandchildren that I know of. And so I really want to just ease my way out, the back door here and let younger people take over and get interested in this.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a great time to be alive as far as the UFO topic goes. And Ray, thank you so much for all this amazing info and sharing stories. And we really look forward to hearing more from you in the future and seeing more work from you. So with that being said, I think that's going to be it for us guys tonight. And thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you here next time.
See ya.
Great fun.